We like to call it the Supernatural Hour. And now, our hosts.
All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome back. It is another episode of Supernatural Hour. I am your host, Castle. With us is Beaker.
What's happening?
Hey, Tim. So we do have Granny Cinnamon here, a.k.a. Deanne. And then we've got Silent Dawn.
Hello.
I have to give a disclaimer for the remainder of this episode. We are going to be talking about Aleister Crowley, who is...
Crowley.
Crowley.
I'm going to say Crowley.
Who is considered to be the wickedest man in the world by the British media back in the day. And the reason I'm going to give a disclaimer right now is because once we start getting into some of the things this guy did and was involved in, this probably is not a safe listen out loud at work episode.
Not safe for work/kids.
Yeah, and probably not a safe episode for kids.
Also put in your headphones if you're at work.
That this is definitely a headphone or listen alone in your car episode. When I say listen alone in your car, that's with your windows up.
Windows up, preferably at 3 in the morning while parked outside of a church.
No, probably not a church. You'll get struck by lightning.
All right, so let's talk about Uggs. Aleister.
Uggs? Let's talk. Yes, they're terrible shoes. Let's go.
Let's talk about Uggs. So, Aleister Crowley. He was actually born in 1875. His given name was Edward Alexander Crowley, and he was born into a wealthy family, where his father was actually kind of a hardcore
He was a priest.
Right. Well, I would say more than a priest. He's kind of an evangelical
Christian priest.
Right.
Kind of a right winger at the time.
Yeah.
Old extreme.
It was kind of a Christianity that didn't even. They were like anti-fun. Like
Dude was super religious.
Yeah, like no pleasure whatsoever. Pleasure was evil.
So I couldn't eat M&Ms?
No, too much pleasure.
Son of a bitch.
You could pretty much work, wake up, do church stuff,
Go to bed.
go to bed,
Repeat.
rinse, repeat.
According to this guy's religion, I'm going to hell.
Yeah, we all are.
Tim, would you like to lead our conversation?
Sure. So as you mentioned, he was born in 1875, and he actually devoted his life to the religion because he had respect for his father. Unfortunately, all that changed when he turned 11. His father had passed away, and he started kind of denouncing the religion altogether, and he would actually go out of his way during Bible study class to prove that there was inconsistencies in the teachings of the Bible to all the people in his class. He also, in a way of kind of like turning away from the religion, he would do some of the stuff that they thought was very immoral, like smoking, masturbating, and having sex with prostitutes. It was because of some of this stuff that he did, his mother actually started calling him the Beast, and he actually enjoyed that name and kind of took it on.
Right. In fact, it was actually said that when he was a teenager, he actually had sex with the family's maid on his mother's bed.
Oh, that's right.
As kind of a... almost kind of a stick it to his mom kind of thing.
He really hated his mom.
He really did.
Yeah, he also hated his name. He actually, like I said, he was born Edward Alexander Crowley, and he decided that Alexander was not a name he particularly liked. Alex wasn't a name he liked. Ed wasn't very... Yeah.
Ed or
He just
Ned
thought all the
or-
diminutives were too soft.
My name is Ed, the Master of Evil, or even worse.
Ted.
My name is Ned, Ned, the Overlord of Satan.
Doesn't really work.
No, it doesn't. So we ended up going with Aleister, which I guess you were saying, Tim, is
It's Gaelic for Alexander.
which actually sounds more menacing.
It does.
But yeah, Aleister is, I mean, how could you be called the wickedest man in the world if your name is... Hi, my name's Alex. Not to make fun of people named Alex, but I mean, Aleister does sound more menacing and more sinister than Alexander.
Hello, I will be your cult leader, Ned.
Again, Ned's a fine name. It just doesn't strike fear.
Yeah.
And
If we have a listener named Ned, we love you, Ned.
We're not making fun of Ed, Edward, Ned, Alex, Alexander, Al, any of that. It's just it just doesn't sound as
It's a diminutive of a name, and when you're wanting to be, the
Master of the Evil.
master of evil, you don't want to have a diminutive name. You want
Well,
to have a powerful name.
I mean, I would change my name to something more sinister like that after being kicked out of school for contracting gonorrhea from a prostitute. So,
right.
I don't know many people get kicked out of high school for contracting gonorrhea from a prostitute.
Well,
nowadays,
he did.
probably not so much, but he did that. And it was around when he turned 20 is when he decided to change his name to Aleister.
So after he was kicked out of basically high school, again, now keep in mind his family is very wealthy. I don't know where they got their wealth from, considering his dad is a preacher.
It was pubs. His family, his father had public houses, not drinking establishments. They did sandwiches, everything. It was described kind of like a Starbucks kind of environment where people would come and do that. And they made all of their money having a lot of these public houses set up around London.
Ah, well, that answers that question then.
There you go.
I was just wondering where, and there it is. And because they had the money, Aleister actually attended Cambridge College. And for the most part, and I'm going to use my air quotation fingers here, he's a relatively normal student.
Aren't they all?
Yeah, right. And where he wrote poetry, he enjoyed literature, and he actually was really into mountain climbing. He actually planned some mountain climbing expeditions, which he later actually did go on several mountain climbing expeditions. He was actually noted as a noteworthy climber who he focused on that solely on that instead of having sex with prostitutes in the name of Satan. He actually probably would have been a noteworthy climber that we would have probably known today as somebody who climbed Everest kind of thing.
That's one of the things that kind of struck me. I thought if he had put his energy into good things, I mean, he was very talented and very intelligent, and I mean, you look at some of the things he did. He was a poet, and he wrote books, and he went on these expeditions and all these things. But he just went so bad.
You can almost say the same thing about Hitler, though.
No, you can.
I mean, Hitler was a poet and he was an artist, and had he put his efforts into the right things, he thought he was
Mein Kampf.
Mein Kampf. No, he thought he was doing something good for the cause that he believed in. I mean, he actually brought Germany out of an economic crisis.
Well, with Crowley, though, he knew he wasn't doing good stuff. In fact, he intentionally was going out of his way to be as
This is very true.
bad as he could.
Yeah,
Like I
and
said,
he was
I
doing
mean,
it intentionally.
He embraced the name the Beast, and he started calling himself that 666 the Beast.
Yeah, the Beast 666 or 666. The Beast was kind of his own personal nicknames that he'd given himself.
Yeah, touch you back on the mountaineering. Part of the things that really shot him down in the mountaineering was they were on a climb, and it was on the third highest peak, I think, in the world, as I remember. And there was a big thing, and there had been some disagreement, and some people left, and there had been an avalanche, and he didn't go and help them. And as a mountaineer, that is the number one responsibility that you have. And going with his lifelong deal of, I'm going to break all the rules, I don't care, I'm going to do what I want to do, he didn't go, and that actually took him out of kind of that whole mountaineering community.
It's actually documented, and we're kind of jumping ahead just a little bit, but it's actually documented that when that happened, they started the climb without him. Like you said, the avalanche happened, but it was said that he actually sat in the tent and drank tea while listening to their cries for help, where he basically just listened to them die, and that basically got him shunned out of mountain climbing.
Yeah, I think that would do it. I would
see
probably
Kenny
shun him
doing
too.
From his wheelchair. Maybe Kenny's the second most evil man in the world. So while he was in college, Crowley was noted for visiting both male and female prostitutes. And it was kind of noted that his visits to them were kind of borderline sadistic. I mean, it wasn't just like, hey, I'm going to go get my jollies by visiting a prostitute. It was kind of weird, ritualistic, sadistic crap that he was doing with these prostitutes. I don't know how willing or unwilling the prostitutes were. In the research I had, it wasn't really clear on that.
Some of the things I read, I tend to believe that it was probably at times borderline not of their choice.
Which wouldn't surprise me a bit, because his his whole kind of credo was do as you will. He is kind of, as Tim would say, I do what I want.
I do what I want. You're not the boss of me.
And that was kind of Crowley's take on life.
Oh, no. Did you just compare me to Aleister Crowley?
Nope.
No.
Brandy, I need to go to confession.
Now, what's kind of interesting is Crowley almost led kind of a double life in a sense. He, had all this weird occult stuff. Like all through college, he was basically delving deeper and deeper into the occult. But he also kind of considered a normal career, like he considered becoming a diplomat. At one point, and I'll get into it in a little bit later, he actually offered to become a spy during the First World War. But when he went to Russia, there was an incident where basically he was accused of treason, and that kind of put an end to his diplomatic aspirations. So after that, basically, Crowley started to write more and more about the futility of human endeavor. He basically thought that we were all wasting our time trying to live good lives and be good people, and that we should essentially just kind of do whatever we wanted, which is kind of what we already touched on. But Crowley actually began publishing erotic poems, occult literature, and books of his occult musings. Crowley's writings and his poems are so pornographic that he would have been arrested under obscenity laws, except for he would actually print them abroad under pseudonyms so that they basically wouldn't arrest him. There's actually a poem, and I'm not going to repeat it, but it was...
Oh, I will. I don't know the whole poem, but it was about someone named Clara and her farts.
Yep.
And how he...
That would be the one.
And how he enjoyed sniffing her farts and the way they smelled.
While they were having sex, and she was... Yeah.
That's
pretty gross.
It's hot.
So while this was going on, Crowley actually began searching out occult groups, and he actually found one that was called the Golden...
Order of the Golden Dawn.
Order of the Golden Dawn, thank you. Tell us about the Order of the Golden Dawn, Tim.
They did stuff. So basically, at this point, he had decided that he wanted to look into doing black magic. And he had searched, I think, for 2 years before he found this group.
Right, I think he was tinkering on his own, but he kind of thought that maybe if he got involved in an actual occult group, he could learn some deeper, darker secrets of the occult.
So eventually he found this chemist named Julian Baker that was a part of this Order of the Golden Dawn and got him to join. The order was devoted to studying paranormal activity and matters of the occult, and eventually Crowley hired a senior member of this group to be basically a live-in personal tutor for himself. So this dude, while they were living together, they would experiment with oh my good lord, I can talk today. Ceremonial magic and ritualistic use of drugs.
Very slowly. Enunciate.
I don't know what people's going to find more entertaining. The fact that I can't read or what we're actually talking about.
Tim, Prop 2 is not legal yet.
Drugs are bad, okay?
All right.
But yeah, I mean, he had this dude basically living with him, and they experimented with drugs, and they experimented with magic.
And quite frankly, given his history and the way he behaved, I would not be surprised in the slightest if they had experimented with each other.
Yeah, I mean that kind of, as you'll
probably.
hear, that was one of the base of his religion in a way was
Right,
was
he
the
believed that-
sexual exploits.
Right, that sex and magic were innately tied together was kind of part of what Crowley believed. In fact, there was an incident, we'll talk about it a little bit later, I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves, where that really clicked for him, and it all kind of came together.
So while this was all going on, he continued to experiment with sex with prostitutes. And one of the higher level members of the Golden Dawn considered Crowley way too controversial and refused to allow him entry into the upper levels of the organization. At this point, I think that's kind of what put him over the edge and kind of pissed him off the most about the order. He got extremely disappointed with the Golden Order, and he actually accused them of just playing with magic and actually not actually doing real magic.
Right, he wanted to go into like darker, deeper stuff than the Golden Order messed with. Now, the Golden Order is interesting because it actually consists of a lot of literary celebrities of the day, if you will. Bram Stoker was a member of
Oh, that's right. Yeah, there was
Bram Stoker, not Bram
Bram
Stoker.
Stoker. I'm sure he might have gone by Stroker when he was in the Golden Order. But if you wanted to sell books, you probably had to go by Stoker.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And Yates, wasn't Yates
I
in
want
it?
to say Yates was in it. There were several kind of big literary names that were members of this. But Crowley, again, said that they were more or less tinkering with magic and weren't going as far as he wanted to go. He wanted to get into really deep, dark, black magic stuff, which this order didn't really mess with.
Yeah, the order was kind of a hangout place for rich kids with nothing better to do.
So what was interesting is about this time is when Crowley started doing the mountaineering stuff full bore, where we get into the incident where he basically sat and listened to his mountaineering group die and didn't lift a finger. He was busy drinking tea while listening for their cries for help that he chose to ignore. So Crowley went and used his fortune and bought a house in North Scotland to perform a ritual which is called the Abermelon. Now the Abermelon dates back to the 14th century and is a 6-month-long ritual designed to allow the caster master demons. It's considered extremely dangerous. In fact, one of the very first lines in the Abermelon is, "Don't do this ritual. It's really dangerous. Here it is. Whatever you do, don't do it."
Oh, is that the 6-month-long ritual?
Correct.
Yep, and it had to do with fasting and waking up at early hours
Like
of the
3
day.
in the morning,
and-
all you could eat was bread and water.
Yeah, it's
Right.
It had to be done a certain way. If the ritual was done incorrectly or wasn't finished, basically these demons he were trying to summon would possess him, and they would use him to do whatever they wanted.
which I'm pretty sure they did.
Yep.
based
on the rest of his life.
his life.
I don't think he did it correctly.
No,
He never finished it.
He never
He
finished
never
it.
finished it,
Yeah,
that's what I mean.
He actually gave up on it, and because really doing this ritual was so arduous, it was considered harder than being like a monk, because again, you had to wake up at 3 a.m. to do certain rites. You had to eat bread and water and fast, and it sounds arduous at best, but for 6 months, it's just pure hell. And so he tried it for several months. Well, not several, a few months, and then said, to hell with it. I'm not doing this anymore, and just quit, which is really, really bad.
Well, the interesting thing that I thought this house is that he bought is in or near Loch Ness, Scotland. And they said that people to this day still do not like going past the house. They'll avoid it if at all possible.
Right. In fact, I don't know that anybody even lives there.
I don't think so.
It's abandoned.
In fact, there's 2 houses that Crowley belonged to. We'll talk to them about the one in Italy here in a minute. But that one's also abandoned. It's boarded up just because of the crap that happened to that particular home. So,
I know at one point, like during the ritual, even during the day, like in broad daylight, the room that he was doing this ritual in was so dark he had to light candles.
oh yeah, as the ritual happened, and it got so, yeah.
And it was in the middle of the day. I mean, it wasn't like it was at night, and it got I can't talk either. Got dark.
It's all fun and games till you talk about Aleister Crowley. Nobody can talk and they get all tongue-tied.
Yeah, well, we all brought type 3s with us today, apparently.
So after he left his Scottish house, tried to do the Abermelon, he ended up moving to Paris, France, where he started kind of hobnobbing with high society. In the process, he met Rose Kelly, who was actually set up for an arranged marriage, basically. Her and Crowley were like the perfect match. She was kind of into doing naughty things. He was kind of into doing naughty things. And they actually married the day after they met. For a time, Crowley started doing like love poems. He got away from poems about orgasms and farts, and was actually doing...
Sounds like a 12-year-old kid.
Perpetually 14. But he started doing like love poems, and they ended up going on their honeymoon to Egypt. And he led her into the king's chamber, one of the Great Pyramids. I believe they snuck in at night, where he had like a grimoire where he basically attempted to summon a demon inside the Great Pyramid with his new wife, Rose Kelly. After they left the pyramid, apparently I guess nothing happened, and he was kind of disappointed.
Well, and he was trying to show off to her of how great a magician he was and how cool he was, and his balloon got a little deflated.
Yes, his balloon.
Well, that's because they didn't have Viagra back then.
But basically, they ended up going back to their room. Rose basically started to go into like a trance and started telling him that they were waiting for him. She started talking about Horace was wanting him to do something. So Crowley ended up taking her to a museum the next day that she'd never been to, and started kind of walking her through the museum, and she just kind of went past stuff, and then she actually...
Because he was actually a little... He didn't believe her because, he had actually kind of studied some of the gods of, and some of the mythology of Egypt, and she didn't know much about it, and so he kind of didn't believe her. He thought she was making crap up, so that's why he took her to the museum to kind of test and see if she was for real.
Right, and she ended up going right next to a statue of Horus, and she kind of freaked out and was like, that's him, that's this god who's talking to me. And he was kind of shocked because, again, she didn't know who he was, but she was able to point him right out. It was shortly after this.
Did you know what the exhibit number was on the statue of Horus?
I'm going to guess 666.
It was.
Was it?
Yep.
What was interesting at that point is they ended up going back to the room, and it was April 4th of 1904, so 4404. Crowley began to hear a voice over his left shoulder, which, for those who listen to our previous episodes and know a little bit about demonology, left is usually bad, over his left shoulder, that basically started to dictate what he called the Book of the Law, which was essentially the Bible for his new religion, which he called Thelmism?
Thelema.
Thelema, thank you. But basically, he started to dictate this Bible, which Crowley began to write, that this voice more or less dictated to him.
And as far as religion goes, it was pretty easy. It was just kind of do what you want.
Yeah, I was going to say, Thelema is basically do what you want, do what makes you happy, basically following society's rules, following Christianity's rules. That's what makes you unhappy. Just if you want to do drugs, do drugs. If you have sex, have sex. If you want something, take it. It was just kind of the way to make yourself happy is to do whatever you want, whenever you want to, and everybody's the happier for it was kind of the premise of the religion. As you kind of see Crowley's life unfold, it becomes rather evident that it doesn't necessarily work long term. From that point forward, Crowley spent all his time trying to kind of compete with the Golden Dawn. He was kind of trying to take away their membership, and he started kind of traveling across Asia. While in Asia, he ended up kind of ditching Rose and taking up with the Vietnamese mistress. Rose actually fell into alcoholism, and then with the sorrow of him more or less leaving her, their daughter died. They had a daughter. The daughter died of typhoid.
Yes.
And essentially between the grief of their daughter dying and Crowley leaving her for a mistress, Rose basically lost her mind and ended up being institutionalized. So at that time, Crowley ended up meeting his first devotee, and I can't remember what his name is. Anybody have his name, perchance?
I don't remember, but I know he referred to him as his disciple.
Yeah, and so the guy was more or less, for lack of a better term, kind of enamored, in love with Crowley.
Fanboy.
A fanboy. And they ended up traveling into the deserts of Africa, kind of into desolation, where they got to a point, they traveled into the desert for 2 days. At that point, they did a ritual to summon some demons, and then they ended the ritual by basically Crowley submitting sexually to this guy, and then that was kind of the end of the ritual. And that's when Crowley kind of clicked with his whole sex magic thing, that sex was magic and magic was sex, and they were kind of intertwined.
The interesting thing I found about that incident is when they would do these rituals, they would draw a circle, and the person doing the ritual would sit inside of the circle as a protection, but he refused to. He actually put his disciple in the circle, but he stood outside the circle, just kind of, he just wanton disregard for anything.
Yeah, it was kind of believed that in magic that the circle protects you, that if you're inside the circle, you're protected from otherworldly forces. And if you're outside the circle, you're subject to attack, you're subject to possession, that kind of thing. And so Crowley was kind of like devil may care.
Literally.
Yeah. in his attitude, and would intentionally sit outside the circle for those type of things. Now, what was interesting is after this particular event, Crowley's disciple, if you will, basically it broke him. He ended up losing his mind, essentially. Just it ruined him as a person. He just was never the same after that. So from that time forward, Crowley began to just kind of roam around from city to city, country to country, and it was actually rumored that he was a spy. And Crowley actually offered to spy, and this is about the time of World War One. Crowley offered to spy for the British government at that time for the Royal Navy, and they actually kind of turned him down. They're like, yeah, we've got enough sex magicians in our spy corps.
You'd be crazy.
We don't need any more, thanks.
He didn't pass the psych eval.
No, I don't think he did. But Crowley was kind of pissed off, and so he essentially decided that he was going to go ahead and spy for the Germans instead, since his own country didn't want him. He's like, screw you, I'll go spy for your enemies. And so he was kind of labeled a traitor at that time.
We probably should say that this was for the British Navy, not the American Navy, correct?
Right, yeah, okay. I think I mentioned that.
Okay, so it was in 1920, Crowley decided that he was going to form a commune, and he went to Italy, because he was kind of exiling himself from all these other countries. But he went to Italy, bought some property, and he said he was going to sweep away Christianity because he believed that Christianity suppressed you, and he wanted everyone to be free and free men from oppression, and just let people use their free will and do what they want. And he was there for about 3 years, and in 1923 Mussolini expelled him. Because just the stuff that they did there was terrible.
You know what? I'm going to stop you right there. I'm actually going to talk about what they did there.
Excellent.
And this is kind of where we get real graphic. I know we've kind of touched on his visiting prostitutes and that.
And fart sniffing.
And fart sniffing. We haven't gotten good yet. This is where things get kind of
make sure those windows are rolled up and that those headphones are in.
And the kids aren't in the car. Your boss isn't walking by. So Crowley basically starts his commune with a group of several followers. Now, he met a gal named Leah in New York who was 19, and he convinced her to follow him and taught her, and she kind of professed that she was required to prostitute her body at all times as part of Thelema.
Pretty much with anyone, anywhere.
Right. And so in this house, they had a room where Crowley had basically drawn pornographic images and demonic images all over the walls, and followers would go into these rooms, or into this particular room, take drugs, and just had to sit in there for extended periods of time, just kind of overcome their demons. Now, part of what Crowley believed was...
or be overcome by demons.
Or be overcome. And Crowley believed that basically you push yourself to what disgusts you, and then you keep pushing until you like that, and then keep pushing further. He kind of bragged about eating human excrement, bragged about eating human flesh. There were rumors that there actually human sacrifice inside this particular...
He would also put menstrual blood on biscuits and eat that, and other sexual body fluids and biscuits and eat that as well.
And then it was also rumored that they had Leia have sex with a goat, and at the point of climax, that actually slit the goat's throat and let the blood drip all over her, and other acts like this as well. Things kind of came to a head when one of the members sacrificed a cat and drank the cat's blood, and became sick from drinking the cat's blood and ended up dying. And his wife actually took all this information to the British tabloids. And this is where Crowley was basically decried as the most wicked man in the world because of what was going on there at the commune.
They let children around while all this was happening?
Oh,
yes.
I'm glad you mentioned that, Tim, because Leia did have 2 or 3 children, and basically the children ran around naked while the adults were doing this, while the adults were doing things to and with each other. None of the research I saw mentioned anything happening to the kids, but I guarantee you...
I'm sure that was very traumatizing, though. I mean,
I'm sure they witnessed things, and I'm sure it just...
Well,
just all
It's
wrong.
do what you want. So
I was going to say, I have a really hard time, and it's disgusting, but I have a really hard time thinking that with kids running around naked and them kind of all high on drugs, doing what they want, that the kids didn't get victimized. As disgusting as it is, I guarantee those kids had issues. And I don't know how they could even leave there and not end up having issues for the rest of their lives.
No, absolutely.
Now, what was interesting is Mussolini, World War II Mussolini, got wind of this crap going on and basically kicked Crowley out of the country at that point.
If Mussolini kicks you out, you know you're bad because,
Right.
dang.
Mussolini, Hitler, that's a bad dude. Let's go. So basically, at that point, Leah ended up just became a street prostitute. A few other members ended up committing suicide. Some, I believe, were institutionalized in insane asylums. Basically, anybody and everybody there had some kind of major life fallout from what happened there at the commune. Crowley, at that point, went back to the UK, and I believe at this point, he was still preaching that basically he was a dark messiah and felt that in about 1,000 years that humanity would be basking in, as he called it, instead of Christianity, Crowley. After the commune period of his life, at that point the fortune that he'd kind of pissed it all away, and he ended up broke, living in a boarding house in the UK. He was addicted to heroin really badly from, his experimentation with that. And so he decided to go up against one of the local tabloids in a libel suit to basically try and see if he could win the lawsuit lottery like a lot of people do and get some money. And what ended up happening is they took it all to trial, and the judge said that after, in a 40-year career, he'd never heard of anything so bad as how Crowley lived and his teachings and everything else, and ruled against Crowley basically in the lawsuit, at which point Crowley was basically bankrupt. Now, what was interesting...
When you think about it, we talk about this now, we've put a disclaimer on of how bad it is, and as I listened, as I've read about it and learned about him, I mean, even today, it's just like, ooh, that's so bad. But you think about when this took place, and I'm sure it was just even, the shock in that time was just amplified because of the times.
Right, I can say the 1920s were kind of a lot more austere as far as society goes than they are today. What was interesting, a la Charles Manson, is after this whole libel suit, a young woman approached Crowley, who at this time is starting to push elderly years, and basically says that she wants to have his child.
And he said, okay.
Yeah, and he's like, all right. So they did Crowley-esque dark magic sex rituals to produce a magic child, and they ended up having a boy whose name was Aleister Ataturk, I think was his name. And fortunately for this child, maybe, I don't know, the child probably still had like 15 strikes against him just with his mom being crazy and Crowley being
He drew the genetic short stick.
Right. But Crowley actually ended up dying in 1947. Now, what I thought was really interesting as I was doing my research into Aleister Crowley, a lot of his teachings, a lot of his beliefs kind of actually came to fruition in the 60s with the free love movement, the free drug movement. I mean, without the black magic aspect, but all his kind of free love and do what you want became huge in the 60s. In fact, John Lennon, the Beatles put Aleister Crowley on the cover of the Sgt. Pepper album. I believe there are actually several other groups who kind of have given Crowley a nod. Ozzy Osbourne.
Oh yeah, Black Sabbath. They have a song called Mr. Crowley.
Exactly. I believe David Bowie.
Rolling Stones.
Rolling Stones were kind of into Crowley, which kind of gives a little bit of credence to when your mom and dad, when you're a kid, said, stay away from that rock and roll, it's the devil's music.
A little bit of truth there.
Maybe a little bit of truth.
Well, the thing is like with those groups and that, they all looked past the whole like devil worshipping, demonic summoning stuff, and they focused just on the whole
sex and
free
drugs.
love, drugs, rock and roll, all that crap. It's like all this other bad stuff they kind of glossed over a little bit because they believed in that same. I mean, 60s, 70s was that era of the free love and the just kind of do what you want.
Good.
Yeah.
And now what was interesting for me with all of this, and the reason we kind of touched on Crowley, and there's even pop icons today, or pop references today. I mean, if anybody watches the TV show Supernatural, the King of Hell for several seasons was Crowley. They also had a demon, I believe, in one of the first 3 seasons, I can't remember which season, whose name was Aleister. So that there's still little nods to Crowley here and there in pop culture. But from a paranormal aspect, why is this relevant, Tim? Tell us why this is relevant.
Well, I mean, I could start with the whole 6-month-long ritual where he's trying to summon demons. I can tell you right now, that's not something you should attempt. And to be honest with you, I don't know what his whole intent was there, but I don't think it will take you 6 months to get a demon if you really want one.
Well, and to be honest with you, if you have intent to summon a demon, you're going to summon a demon.
Yeah, you don't have to do a 6-month ritual. If you want one, you'll find one. I mean, hell, pick up a damn Ouija board. I'm not saying don't pick up a Ouija board.
I know.
But basically, like, if you're... people are going to get mad at this, but if you're that retarded that you want to summon a demon, pick up a Ouija board. And then when you're at it, pick up a handgun and, play Russian roulette because it's just as smart.
And that was kind of my take with the whole Crowley thing, is that the guy intentionally went out of his way to do everything that we tell you you're not supposed to. And, for a time, I'm sure that his whole free love and drugs and all that thing was great in the moment. But even his later writings before he died, he wrote in some of his journals that he was kind of a wastrel, that I think he kind of realized that he pissed away his life.
Well, and you look at all of the followers, and none of his followers left and led a happy, fulfilling life. I mean, they all...
Suicide, insanity.
Yeah, they all sank into just depravity, which I believe, and I don't know for 100% certain, but based on what they were doing, they probably all had the demons.
Yeah, well, what's interesting, and what I found fascinating the most, is that both the house in Scotland and the house in Italy are basically abandoned. They're boarded up. I don't know.
Well, I'm sure those places are haunted as shit, too.
Well, I was going to say...
especially the one in Scotland where he tried to summon demons.
Well, and when they say haunted, not like good haunted, like Granny Pioneer ghosts. Like
Type 3 Central.
Like Amityville.
Amityville and Conjuring haunted.
Like Scary and Larry haunted.
Well, and I guarantee, based on the research I did on Crowley, or Crowley, have it how you will.
Crowley. Crowley.
Curly.
Put them together.
Larry
Curly.
I guarantee that him and every single one of his followers had to have had Type 3 spirits with them, if not completely
Multiple.
Possessing them. It almost sounded like Crowley was basically open to the fact that here I am, do what you will. And my guess is, based on the evil crap he was doing, they're more than happy just to hop inside and be along for the ride. Because it sounds like...
And that's how you get, like, cults like the Manson family.
Well, I say, it doesn't sound like these guys were too far off.
Well, I'm pretty sure that's where he got a lot of his ideas from, was from Aleister.
It wouldn't surprise me in the slightest. Aleister Crowley is kind of a case study in doing everything you possibly can to not do what you're supposed to. Oh, as far as why someone would go down the dark rabbit hole, why someone would go down the dark path like Crowley did was mental illness, which in a lot of cases could be the case. I wonder with him, and I'm sure there is a touch of mental illness there, but I think just the way the belief system that his parents had was pushed on him so hard that he went to the exact opposite extreme, and they just kind of embraced it. And again, I think he's screwing with stuff where he invited basically demons into his life, and they basically started kind of running the show and were kind of telling him what to do, and he was having a good time with it.
You've been listening to the Supernatural Hour at AdvancedParanormal.com. The Supernatural Hour is part of the Radio Ronin network, found at RadioRonin.com. Copyright by Advanced Paranormal Services.